The war did not begin with fire. It began with silence. Across the mapped sectors of the galaxy, something subtle shifted, so subtle that most didn't notice it at first. Trade convoys halted mid-route. Long-range communications flickered, then stabilized into uneasy quiet. Military patrols reported nothing unusual, and that was exactly the problem. Because humanity was always loud. Not just in sound but in presence. Their transmissions were constant. Music bleeding into diplomatic channels, encrypted chatter bouncing between fleets, civilian broadcasts leaking laughter, arguments, stories. Even their silence used to feel alive. And then one day, nothing. No distress calls. No signals. No noise. Earth had gone quiet. At first, it was dismissed as a network failure. Then sabotage. Then internal collapse. But as hours turned to days, and days to a tense, suffocating stillness, something far worse began to take shape. A coordinated absence. Then the message arrived. It appeared simultaneously across every major communication relay in coalition space. Clean, precise, undeniable. No encryption. No signature beyond the authority that mattered most. Planet Earth has been neutralized. No explanation followed. None was needed. In the high command chambers of the coalition, no one spoke for a long time. Representatives of 100 species sat frozen, their various forms rigid with disbelief or, more dangerously, understanding. Because humanity had always been a problem. Not the strongest. Not the most advanced. Not the oldest. But the most unpredictable. They refused to conform to galactic order. Where others saw structure, humans saw obstacles. Where others saw diplomacy, humans saw opportunity or threat. They formed alliances that didn't make sense. Broke rules they hadn't agreed to. Survived scenarios that should have wiped them out. And worst of all, they adapted. Too fast. Too well. There had been debates, of course. Endless discussions, warnings, proposals. Some had argued for containment. Others for isolation. A few had suggested extermination. It seemed those voices had finally been heard. Far from the core worlds, beyond the monitored trade routes, the remnants of what had happened to Earth drifted through space like a scar no one wanted to look at directly. The attack had been overwhelming. Orbital bombardment had begun without warning, kinetic strikes designed not just to destroy cities, but to fracture tectonic plates. Continents split. Oceans surged violently as atmospheric ignition followed, turning vast stretches of water into rolling clouds of superheated vapor. Cities, those dense, vibrant clusters of human life, were gone within hours. Satellites fell like burning rain. Defense systems, formidable as they were, had been disabled in the opening minutes. Coordinated strikes severed communication networks, blinding Earth before it even understood it was under attack. For 72 hours, the planet burned. And then, it didn't. Because there was nothing left to burn. When the last coalition fleet withdrew, Earth was no longer a world in the way the galaxy understood it. It was a ruin. A shattered sphere of ash, broken continents, and churning storms that never seemed to settle. No signals emerged from its surface. No ships launched in escape. No survivors called out into the void. Earth became a graveyard. And like all graveyards, it was left alone. In the cycles that followed, official records were amended. Humanity was classified as extinct. Trade routes were redrawn to avoid Sol system entirely. Navigation charts marked it as a hazard zone, unstable gravity wells, volatile atmosphere, debris fields from fallen orbital structures. A warning, not just of danger, but of consequence. Among the younger species of the galaxy, the story of Earth became something else entirely. A cautionary tale whispered in academic halls and military academies. This is what happens when a species grows too defiant. This is what happens when order is challenged. And for most, that was enough. But not for all. There were those who had worked alongside humans, fought beside them, traded with them, learned from them. They remembered things the official reports did not include. They remembered how humans rebuilt faster than they fell. How they turned defeat into strategy. How they survived things that should have ended them. Those individuals, scattered, quiet, careful, kept watching the Sol system from a distance. Not because they expected to see life, but because they couldn't quite believe it was gone. Decades passed. Then a century. Then two. The galaxy moved on. New conflicts arose. New alliances formed. Old grudges faded into history. The absence of humanity became normal. An empty space where something once existed, now irrelevant. Earth remained silent. Unmoving. At least, that's what everyone believed. Until, in the far reaches of Coalition territory, at a forgotten listening post orbiting a dying star, an automated system flagged something it had not detected in over 200 years. A signal. Fragmented. Origin, Sol system. The station's aging processors struggled to interpret it, cycling through outdated human language matrices, reconstructing broken data streams piece by piece. It took nearly 3 hours. When the translation finally completed, the station transmitted the result to every major relay it could still reach. 3 words. Simple. Impossible. We are here. And for the first time since Earth had gone silent, the galaxy held its breath. The message spread faster than any fleet ever could. It leapt from relay to relay, from station to station, cutting across trade lanes and military channels alike. Some systems tried to block it. Others attempted to suppress it. None succeeded. Because once something is seen, truly seen, it cannot be unseen. We are here. 3 words. That was all it took to fracture 2 centuries of certainty. At Coalition High Command, the reaction was immediate and controlled. Emergency councils were convened within minutes. Entire fleets were placed on standby. Data analysts, linguists, and intelligence officers flooded into war rooms, their screens already filled with the signal's waveform. It's a residual echo, one official insisted, mandibles clicking sharply. Old transmissions trapped in gravitational distortion. It's not, another cut in. The timestamp is current. The signal structure is deliberate. Impossible. Yes, the analyst replied quietly. That's the problem. Because everything about the signal defied explanation. It wasn't degraded the way ancient broadcasts should have been. It carried no drift, no fragmentation consistent with 200 years of decay. It was clean, too clean, like it had been sent moments ago. And its origin point was unmistakable. Sol system. Far from the core worlds, at orbit relay KX-77, the station that had first detected the transmission, the silence had returned. But it was no longer empty. It was waiting. The station itself was old. Forgotten by most, maintained only by automated routines and the occasional inspection drone. Its sensors, though outdated, had one advantage. They were persistent. And persistence had found something. The signal came again. Stronger this time. Not a burst, but a pattern. A sequence. Technicians across Coalition space scrambled to intercept it, to decode it faster than before. Entire computational clusters were dedicated to analyzing its structure. This time, the translation came in minutes. We endured. A ripple of unease spread through every system that received it. Endured what? No one asked the question out loud. Because they already knew. The first visual confirmation came hours later. Long-range telescopes, reoriented, recalibrated, pushed beyond their standard tolerances, focused once more on the Sol system. What they saw did not match the records. Earth was still scarred. Continents remained fractured. Vast stretches of land were blackened beyond recognition. Storm systems churned violently across the atmosphere, unnatural and persistent. But there was something else. Faint at first, barely distinguishable from residual thermal activity. Then stronger. Structured. Regular. Not random. Not natural. Cities. Not as they once were, but unmistakable in their geometry. Points of illumination spread across the dark side of the planet, flickering into existence one by one. As if something beneath the surface was waking up. Panic did not come all at once. It crept in. Quietly. Strategically. Coalition officials issued statements urging calm, framing the phenomenon as an anomaly, An unexplained but contained irregularity. Exploration probes were authorized. Unmanned only. No species volunteered for a manned mission. Not yet. Because beneath the official language, beneath the composed statements and measured responses, a single thought echoed through every mind that understood what was happening. Humans were not supposed to survive. The first probe entered the Sol system 12 hours after the second signal. It transmitted continuously, relaying data back in real time as it passed the outer planets, crossed the debris fields of shattered satellites, and approached Earth's orbit. Everything matched the historical records. Until it didn't. Because the debris had been moved. Not cleared. Repositioned. The probe's sensors detected patterns, organized clusters of wreckage forming loose orbital rings. Pathways had been carved through them, precise and intentional. Navigation corridors. Someone had been here. Recently. When the probe descended into the upper atmosphere, interference began immediately. Not random. Targeted. Its communication feed flickered, distorted, then stabilized again, but weaker, as though something was actively pushing against it. Still it continued. Through ash-laden clouds. Through electrical storms that burned brighter than they should. Through a sky that had no right to sustain life. And then, it broke through. The surface came into view. And every observer watching the feed, across 1,000 systems, fell silent. Because Earth was not dead. It was changed. Massive structures rose from the ruins, angular, unfamiliar, partially embedded into the landscape as if grown rather than built. Craters had been repurposed into something else entirely, sealed environments glowing faintly from within. Movement registered across the surface. Coordinated. Alive. Then the probe detected a signal, local, powerful, directed. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a response. The feed sharpened suddenly, as though something had taken control of the probe's own systems, stabilizing it, guiding it, pulling it closer. The camera tilted downward. Focused. And there, standing atop a ridge of blackened stone, was a human. They were not as the galaxy remembered. Taller, perhaps. Or maybe it was the way they stood. Unmoving. Unafraid. Their form was partially obscured by something that wasn't quite armor and wasn't quite skin, dark, seamless, shifting subtly as though alive. Even through the distortion, reflected light. Not natural light. Something else. Something internal. For several long seconds, the humans simply looked at the probe. At them. At the galaxy watching from a distance of light years. Then slowly, they smiled. The probe's transmission cut to static. But not before one final data packet was sent. A message. Undeniably human. You left. A pause, barely a heartbeat in digital time. We didn't. And across the galaxy, for the second time in 200 years, fear returned. They did not send another probe. Not immediately. The first one had returned more than data. It had returned doubt. And doubt, within the coalition, was far more dangerous than any weapon. For 2 days, the galaxy watched in silence. Every major system kept its sensors trained on Sol. Every relay monitored for new signals. Military fleets held position at the edges of mapped space, waiting for orders that did not come. Because no one agreed on what those orders should be. They're survivors, one faction argued. Nothing more. Contained. Isolated. Whatever remains of humanity is confined to a dead world. No, another replied. That was not survival. That was adaptation. The word hung uncomfortably in the air. Adaptation. It had always been humanity's most unsettling trait. At last, High Command reached a decision. They would not approach blindly again. Instead of a single probe, they deployed a network, dozens of observation drones, smaller, faster, harder to detect. They would not descend immediately. They would watch first. Learn. Understand. Control the situation. That was the plan. It did not go as expected. The drones entered Sol system in formation, spreading out as they passed the orbit of Mars. Each one followed a different vector, feeding information back to a centralized relay far beyond the system's edge. At first, everything appeared normal. If anything about a dead world could be called normal. Then the first drone went dark. No warning. No distress signal. Just gone. Seconds later, another vanished. Then another. Interference? An analyst suggested. Negative, came the reply. Their systems were functioning perfectly. The sentence never finished. Because on the primary display, something new appeared. A shape. Moving. It was not a ship in the conventional sense. There was no visible propulsion. No engine flare. No emission signature that matched known technology. It moved through space the way a thought moved. Silent, direct, effortless. Black against the stars, its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Edges blurred, shifting slightly as though the object refused to be fully defined. The drones attempted to adjust course. They were too slow. The shape passed through them, and they were simply no longer there. No explosion. No debris. No trace. Pull back, High Command ordered immediately. The remaining drones began to retreat, accelerating away from Seoul as fast as their systems allowed. The shape did not pursue. It didn't need to, because by the time the drones reached the edge of the system, something else had already happened. The feed changed. Not cut. Not disrupted. Every remaining drone suddenly received a new signal, overriding their control protocols, rewriting their directives in real time. The transmission did not originate from the drones themselves. It came from Earth. Unavoidable. What followed was not a message. It was a broadcast. Visual. Unfiltered. Intentional. The cameras shifted, reorienting toward the surface once more. This time, there was no interference. No distortion. No resistance. It was as if humanity wanted them to see. The image resolved into something vast. The structure, part city, part machine, stretching across what had once been a continent. Towers rose like jagged spires, interconnected by glowing pathways that pulsed with steady, deliberate rhythm. Nothing about it resembled human architecture as the galaxy remembered it. It was too integrated, too alive. The ground itself seemed to respond to movement, shifting subtly beneath structures that grew directly from it. Energy flowed visibly through the environment, not contained but woven into every surface. And everywhere. Humans. They moved differently now. Faster. More precise. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. Groups worked in perfect coordination without visible communication. Machines responded to them instantly, no interfaces, no controls. Because there was no separation. The line between human and technology had disappeared. Close-up scans revealed the truth. Their bodies had changed. Not grotesquely. Not monstrously. But undeniably. Skin carried faint patterns, lines of dim light that shifted beneath the surface like circuitry. Their eyes glowed softly, adjusting brightness as they turned toward different light sources. Some bore visible augmentations, limbs reinforced with materials unknown, structures that blended seamlessly with organic tissue. Others looked almost unchanged, until they moved. Too fast. Too smooth. Too aware. "They're not human," someone whispered. "No," another replied, voice unsteady. "They're what humans became." The feed shifted again. This time, focusing on a single figure. The same one the first probe had seen. Standing at the edge of a massive platform overlooking the transformed landscape. Waiting. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the figure stepped forward. And the galaxy realized. This was not observation. This was introduction. The human looked directly into the camera. Not searching. Not curious. Certain. As if they had known this moment would come. As if they had been preparing for it. When they spoke, there was no distortion. No delay. Their voice carried across light years as though distance no longer mattered. Measured. Unmistakably human. "You called this a graveyard." The words were simple. But behind them was something else. Not anger. Not grief. Something colder. The human's gaze shifted slightly, as if taking in the entirety of the galaxy watching them. Then back. Focused. Unblinking. "You were right." The pause. Long enough for the weight of the statement to settle. This is where we buried who we used to be. The transmission ended. Not cut. Not interrupted. Concluded. And across the galaxy, every system, every species, every leader understood something that no amount of data could soften. Humanity had not survived Earth. They had transformed within it. Evolved in the ashes. Rebuilt in the dark. Earth was not a graveyard. It was a cradle. And whatever had risen from it was no longer something the galaxy could predict. The galaxy did not declare war. It prepared for one. Quietly. Carefully. Without announcement. Because no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Humanity had come back, stronger. Coalition fleets mobilized along every major sector bordering the Sol system. Defensive grids were activated. Long-dormant weapons platforms were brought online for the first time in centuries. Not to attack. To prepare. Officially, the situation was still classified as containment and observation. Unofficially, it was fear. They've made no hostile move, one council member argued. They've already made one, another replied. They survived. That ended the discussion. Because survival, in this case, wasn't passive. It was defiance. Days passed. No new signals came from Earth. No ships left the system. No threats were issued. And somehow, that silence felt worse than anything before it. Because humanity had always been unpredictable. And now, they were patient. The first human ship appeared without warning. Not detected. Not tracked. Not intercepted. Simply was there. At the center of coalition space, above the heavily fortified command world of Arctis Prime, something tore through reality without leaving a trace behind it. One moment, empty orbit. The next, a ship. It was enormous. Not in the way of traditional warships, with layered armor and weapon arrays designed to intimidate. This was different. It was seamless. A single, continuous structure of dark material that seemed to drink in the surrounding starlight. Its surface shifted subtly, like liquid held in a perfect shape. No seams. No visible weapons. No engines. No weakness. Alarms erupted across Arctis Prime. Defense platforms rotated instantly, locking onto the object. Orbital cannons powered up. Fighter squadrons launched in coordinated waves, forming a defensive perimeter. Within seconds, the ship was surrounded. Targeted. Outnumbered. And completely still. Identify yourself. Command transmitted, voice amplified across every channel. You are in restricted coalition space. Power down and prepare for escort or you will be engaged. No response. Not even static. Final warning. The transmission cut. Not interrupted. Overwritten. The human signal replaced it effortlessly, spreading across every frequency at once. Military, civilian, encrypted, it didn't matter. All channels belonged to them now. The voice that followed was calm. Not loud. But impossible to ignore. You came to our home. Every weapon remained locked. Every ship held position. But something had already shifted. Because that voice carried no fear. No urgency. Only certainty. The pause. Now we've come to yours. Command did not hesitate. Fire. The void lit up. Hundreds of weapons discharged simultaneously. Energy beams, kinetic rounds, guided munitions, all converging on a single point in space. Enough force to erase a fleet. Enough to shatter a planet. The human ship did not move. The first impact struck. And vanished. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Gone. As if the attacks had never existed. What? The next volley fired before the question could finish. Same result. No explosion. No impact. No damage. Then the human ship moved. Not forward. Not backward. But through. It crossed the distance between itself and the nearest coalition cruiser in less than a measurable instant. One moment, separation. The next, the cruiser's systems failed instantly. Weapons offline. Shields gone. Engines unresponsive. Crew alive, but powerless. Drifting. Panic spread through the fleet. Maintain formation. Continue firing. They obeyed. They always obeyed. It didn't matter. The human ship moved again. And again. And again. Each movement precise. Controlled. Intentional. Ships went dark one by one. Not destroyed. Disabled. Neutralized. 6 minutes. That's how long it took. 6 minutes for the most powerful military force in the galaxy to be rendered completely helpless. And through it all, the human ship never showed a weapon. Silence fell over the battlefield. Not the empty silence from before. This was heavier. Final. The human ship returned to its original position above Arctis Prime. Unharmed. Unchallenged. Unstoppable. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then the transmission resumed. We remember what you did. No anger. No rage. No need for it. But this is not revenge. Across command centers, across warships, across entire worlds, no one moved. No one spoke. Because they understood. This wasn't a threat. It was a statement. This is a correction. The human ship began to fade. Not cloaking. Not retreating. Disappearing. As if it had never been bound by space to begin with. Before it vanished completely, one final message spread across the galaxy. Stay where you are. The pause. We're watching now. And then, it was gone. No warp trail. No trace. No explanation. Only the aftermath remained. A fleet, intact but powerless. A command structure, shaken to its core. A galaxy forced to confront a truth it could no longer deny. Humanity had returned. Not as soldiers. Not as survivors. But as something far beyond both. And for the first time in its history, the galaxy realized it was no longer in control. The galaxy did not sleep after that. It couldn't. Not when something stronger than war had arrived. No fleets moved. Not because they were ordered to stand down, but because no one dared to advance. The coalition, once absolute in its authority, found itself in a position it had never prepared for. Irrelevance. Reports flooded in from across known space. Ships failing mid-conflict, disabled without warning. Weapons systems shutting down seconds before firing. Entire battlefields going silent before the first shot was ever taken. At first, commanders blamed sabotage. Then coincidence. Then something far worse. Patterns. Every conflict that reached a critical point, every war about to escalate into extinction, simply stopped. Not through negotiation. Not through victory. Through interruption. A human ship would appear. Always the same. Silent. But unreachable. It never attacked first. It didn't need to. Because the moment it arrived, everything else stopped working. At the edge of a collapsing binary system, two rival empires prepared to annihilate each other. Decades of tension had led to this moment. Thousands of ships aligned, weapons primed, commanders ready to burn entire civilizations for the sake of dominance. Then the human ship appeared between them. No warning. No demand. Just presence. Both fleets fired. Instinct. It didn't matter. Their weapons never reached their target. Systems failed mid-discharge. Energy collapsed into nothing. Targeting arrays shut down as if they had been disconnected from reality itself. Ships drifted. Powerless. The human ship did not respond with force. Instead, it transmitted. No. That was all. And somehow, it was enough. Across the galaxy, the message spread faster than any command could. Humanity was not conquering. They were enforcing. A new pattern emerged. Wars ended before they began. Conflicts dissolved into uneasy silence. Empires that had ruled through fear found themselves restrained. Not destroyed. Controlled. Because humanity didn't take power. They removed the ability to misuse it. In the halls of the coalition, what remained of its leadership gathered one final time. There were no arguments now. No denial. Only acceptance. We cannot fight them, one voice said. We cannot understand them, another added. A long pause followed. Then quietly, we cannot ignore them. The truth settled heavily over the chamber. For centuries, the galaxy had feared chaos. But it feared order. Not imposed by law. Not enforced by armies. but by something that simply was humanity. Far beyond the core systems, beyond the political boundaries that once defined power, the Sol system no longer stood as a forbidden graveyard. It had become something else. A center. Ships approached it now. Cautiously. Carefully. Not as invaders, but as observers. What they found defied everything the galaxy thought it understood. Earth was no longer broken. It was transformed. The scars remained, but they were no longer signs of destruction. They were foundations. Where continents had split, vast structures now bridged the gaps. Impossible architectures that seemed to grow from the planet itself. Oceans glowed faintly beneath their surfaces, housing entire ecosystems redesigned for balance rather than survival. The sky, once choked with ash, now shimmered with controlled atmospheric layers, shifting to regulate climate, energy, and light in perfect harmony. And humanity, they were everywhere. Not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as something far more unsettling. Observers. They watched the galaxy the way the galaxy once watched them. Quietly, patiently, without interference. Until it mattered. A delegation was sent. It took years to agree on it. Decades to prepare. When they finally arrived at Earth, they were not greeted with weapons. Or defenses. Or even suspicion. They were met with understanding. A single human approached their landing vessel. They looked almost normal. Almost. But there was something in their eyes. Not power. Not superiority. Something deeper. Perspective. "You're here to ask what we are," the human said calmly. No translation delay. No communication barrier. The delegation leader hesitated. Then nodded. The human looked up at the sky, at the stars that had once burned their world. Then back. "We are what you made us become." No accusation. No bitterness. Just truth. "You turned Earth into a graveyard." The pause. "So we learned how to live in one." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Not hostile. Final. The human stepped aside slightly, gesturing toward the horizon, toward a world reborn in ways the galaxy could barely comprehend. "We don't rule," they continued. "We don't conquer." Another pause. "But we won't let you destroy yourselves." The meaning was clear. This was not an offer. It was a constant. Across the galaxy, in systems both great and small, the same realization took hold. Humanity had not returned to reclaim what was lost. They had risen to ensure it never happened again. And on Earth, the graveyard world, life burned brighter than it ever had before. Not fragile. Not fleeting. Enduring. Humanity had died. That much was true. But what rose from the ashes was not a survivor. Not a soldier. Not even a species. It was something the galaxy had never seen before. A civilization that could not be broken again. And this time, the galaxy would remember.